That is the second feature that Lasswell highlighted, right? And third thing, and of course this was guided by Lasswell's study of the behavioral revolution in political science, wherein behavioralism at certain stage would emphasize upon facts and facts and facts, meaning that hyperfactualism is something which should be avoided in Lasswell's view. So that is why Lasswell emphasized that the third characteristic of policy science should be identified as its explicitly normative approach, right? Meaning that the values or subjectivity cannot be denied altogether, cannot be ruled out altogether. So normativity is something which would be part of the policy science. So when we look at the decisions of the government, one can actually try to understand the intentions behind why a particular decision was taken, right? Whether there were objective criteria which guided the government to take a particular decision, or there were certain other factors which rather made the government to take the decision. So was there some value biasness, or were there some subjective criteria which were applied by the government to arrive at decisions, which rather made the government to take a decision and implement it in a manner which would be oriented towards achieving certain political objectives, or which would be oriented towards giving benefits to a specific section of society, or which would be guided by certain ideas or values which might be the larger or dominant feature of the society at large, right? So this would be the third feature in Lasswell's view, meaning that as far as the policy science is concerned, policy science is to be identified with its distinct features according to Lasswell, and these distinct features would be: number one, its multidisciplinary character; number two, its problem solving approach; and number three, its normative character, right? So this is how one can understand, this is how one can identify the policy sciences as distinct field within the larger political science discipline, right? Is it clear what we have discussed thus far? सुनाई दे रहा है? आप लोग सुन पा रहे हैं? सुन पा रहे हैं?
सर आपने एक फीचर बताया जिसमें कि वो करेंट प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करता है
प्रॉब्लम सर सॉल्विंग, राइट.
सर मतलब तो without looking into the previous causes or the structure current problems को कैसे identify करेगा और जब आइडेंटिफाई नहीं करेंगे तो उसको सॉल्व कैसे करेंगे?
हाँ, करेक्ट. सी यू हैव रेज्ड अ वेरी वैलिड पॉइंट कि जब तक जब प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग की बात हो, वो क्या है कि वो एक लार्जर जो प्रोसेस होता है पॉलिसी का, वो उसका पार्ट होता है, राइट? मीनिंग दैट अभी जो हम समझने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि जब हम पॉलिसी साइंस को समझते हैं तो पॉलिसी साइंस के जो ब्रॉड फीचर्स हैं या जो आइडेंटिफाएबल फीचर्स हैं जो कि इसको एक डिस्टिंक्ट डिसिप्लिन बनाता है विद इन द लार्जर एम्बिट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल साइंस, हम उसको आइडेंटिफाई करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. मीनिंग दैट पॉलिटिकल साइंस ऑलरेडी एग्जिस्टेड, राइट? पॉलिटिकल साइंस एज अ डिसिप्लिन एग्जिस्टेड, right, which try to look at the larger political behavior of actors, of institutions, or even it try to look at the processes in the society. ठीक है, लेकिन ये पॉलिसी साइंस जो होगा वो किस ढंग से डिफरेंट होगा, तो वहीं पे लासवेल का ये मानना था कि पॉलिसी साइंस डिफरेंट है इन पैरामीटर्स के अंतर्गत. अगर हम इन कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स को आइडेंटिफाई करें तो पॉलिसी साइंस को हम अलग एक कहीं ना कहीं फील्ड समझ सकते हैं जो कि एक प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग अप्रोच को लेकर आता है, न कि सिर्फ उनको एक्सप्लेन या उनको डिस्क्राइब करने के व्यू से एग्जिस्ट करता है, राइट? बट यू हैव अ वेरी वैलिड पॉइंट. लेकिन उसको हम फर्दर समझने की कोशिश करेंगे जब हम लासवेल का ही जो पॉलिसी साइकिल हम समझने की कोशिश करेंगे, इन विच लासवेल हैज टॉक्ड अबाउट 7 different stages, right? 7 different stages which every policy is expected to cover in terms of completing its cycle, राइट? तो उसमें जो आप सही बता रहे हैं कि उसमें कहीं ना कहीं जो प्रीवियस जो एक्सपीरियंसेस होते हैं या प्रीवियस जो इंफॉर्मेशन डेटा या जो हिस्ट्री होता है, वो सारे कहीं ना कहीं एक इम्पॉर्टेंट रोल प्ले करते हैं. दैट वुड कम, बट दैट इज पार्ट ऑफ द लार्जर policy process, right? That is the part of larger policy process. Okay, is that clear? Clear है? Okay, right. हाँ, ओके. ओके, राइट. नाउ कमिंग बैक, राइट. अगर हम समझने की कोशिश करें तो जहाँ पे लास्टवेल ने इस ढंग से पॉलिसी और पब्लिक पॉलिसी के फीचर्स को आइडेंटिफाई करने की कोशिश की है, वहीं पे यू नो हाँ, बताइए सुधांशु. हाँ, हाँ, टेल मी. Okay, explicitly nominated. Yes, there would be various examples, right? Say, for instance, take examples, take examples which you may see around you, right? Say, for instance, under the present circumstances, wherein the government decides that as far as its healthcare policies are concerned, right? So healthcare policies are to be to so executed or to be so formulated that the larger problems of the society at present, which is to combat or which is to tackle the situation created out of COVID-19, can be handled, right? Or which is which possibly the problems arising out of this global pandemic, that can be addressed, right? Now, when Lasswell was emphasizing upon the normative character or explicit normative character of a particular policy, then he was trying to highlight that behind this decision of the government, there might be certain values or norms which would be guiding the decisions of the government. So not necessarily there would only be the objective criteria based on facts which would guide the decisions of the government. Rather than there would also be certain values, or there would certainly be certain subjective elements which would guide the decisions of the government, right? So it is not simply to ensure that when the government takes a decision, government would not keep in mind the benefits that may go to a particular section of society, or the problems which may be faced by the other sections of the society, right? So when government is looking at all these aspects, it becomes very difficult in Lasswell's view to look at these things in a purely objective manner. So there would be experiences which would guide the actions of the government. There would be certain psychological orientation of the leadership which would guide the actions of the government, right? There would be perceptions which would feed the policy making circles as far as their decisions are concerned, right? So that is where he was trying to emphasize upon the normative character, meaning that there would be certain values, there would be certain subjective elements which would guide the decisions of the government. See, this thing would become more clear when we are discussing the 7 different stages in the policy cycle that Lasswell has explained, right? So there are two things, and let me add a little more here, right? There are two things. One, that you are simply trying to look at the facts and data in order to arrive at certain decisions, right? So say, for instance, if the government has to decide that the lockdown has to continue, right? Then how the government would reach this decision that the lockdown has to continue and the academic institutions are supposed to remain shut or remain closed for a month or so? How the government would arrive at this decision? Now, this would not be based simply on the data from the field which would be given to the government. Rather than, the government would also keep certain political considerations in mind. Say, for instance, if certain things happens which may have some political ramifications, for the government, right? So it is those subjective elements or those normative criteria possibly that Lasswell is referring to. Okay, so political ramifications of a particular discipline, for instance, right? Or the government's or the or the government's the government's approach, wherein the government is not trying to look at or judge these things simply on the basis of cost and benefit, rather than the government is also trying to factor in that what would be considered as good, or what would be considered as something valuable for the society. So whenever the government takes a decision, then these things would be very much be part of the decision making process by the government, right? So it is with that respect that Lasswell is emphasizing upon the subjective criteria. Lasswell is emphasizing upon the explicitly normative character of policy sciences. Okay, but as I told you, this would be more clear when we are coming to the discussions on these 7 different stages in the policy cycle that Lasswell has given, right, as part of his policy cycle model, right?